everyone. I hope everybody's having a great conference, and I hope everyone's having an awesome afternoon. My name is Janie Clayton, and I am here talking about Beyond White, embracing the iOS design aesthetic. So here's just a little bit of my background. So this is a nice, lovely picture of me. I'm always very happy, as you can tell. For my day job, I am a software engineer and robot builder at Sonoplot. I am the co-author of the iOS 8 SDK development and the Swift Apprentice book. I just took over as the team lead for the Swift tutorial team at raywenderlich.com, and I am the co-host of NS Brief. If you're looking at this nice, lovely little list of credentials, one thing that you will notice on there is that I am not putting on here that I am a graphic designer. My background before I became a software developer was that I went to school for journalism, and then when I couldn't find a job as a journalist, I kind of doubled down on the whole liberal arts thing, and I went back to school for video editing, graphic design, and audio engineering. So I spent 2 years going and learning how to use Photoshop, learning how to use After Effects, learning how to do all of these audio, video, graphic-y type things. And then after I spent 10 years total going to school for all of these different things, 2 weeks after I got done with school, the Great Recession hit. So all of the places that I thought I was going to go and work at for graphic design, video editing, and stuff like that, they either went out of business, or they had hiring freezes, or they cut half of their staff. So I figured out that I'd made some kind of poor decisions in my earlier life and that I needed to be an adult and do something else. So I kind of went back and forth about whether I wanted to go into programming or go to law school. Then I looked at how much it cost to go and get programming classes at the local community college versus going to law school, and the community college won out. Initially, when I went to school for programming, I originally was planning to just go in for Java or .NET, and I was going to go and work for the state of Wisconsin because working for the state of Wisconsin was such a great, awesome career thing back in 2010 before we elected Scott Walker. And that was kind of my plan. That was what I was going to be doing for my living. So just kind of to give an idea, this is what I've been doing for 10 years. I was working with something that was like this. So I was doing graphic design stuff. I was working with Illustrator, I was working with Photoshop. And then I took my first iOS class, and I saw this. I saw Interface Builder. I know most people like to complain a lot about Xcode and Interface Builder, but for me, coming from all of this graphic design background and stuff like that, this was something that I was able to grok. I understood this. This was something that felt familiar to me. It felt a lot more familiar to me than going into Eclipse and writing Java and having all of this weird logical code and other stuff. And this just completely captured my imagination. This is what made me decide that I was going to be an iOS developer, was that I could go and I could take all of these awesome skills that I'd spent years honing and building over a bunch of time, and I could actually make them useful and bring them out into the world. And I was so excited about being able to be an iOS developer because I could go and work with this and do really awesome things, and the sky was the limit and everything was great. And this happened. So iOS 7 came out 2 years ago, and I'm sure I'm not the only person who had this reaction to it when I first saw it. It was like, oh, you've redecorated! I don't like it! Yeah, we went from having all of these, like sky is the limit, we could do anything with our user interfaces, to having a lot of really interesting different kinds of constraints. So I heard a lot of people kind of complaining about the issues with the iOS 7 design, that we had this flat design, so when we had buttons, they didn't have outlines, they didn't have drop shadows, so they kind of looked like labels, and it was kind of hard to deal with. Everything was like white with a couple of splashes of color in it. It was difficult to give your apps personality because we felt like everything had to look like it was designed by Johnny Ive, and all of these features that they wanted us to use, like the parallax stuff that had the Gaussian blur behind it, these things did not exist in iOS 7. We got them in iOS 8. By that point, everybody was kind of like, whatever, this was like so last year, we don't care. So I was just kind of like, what, I'm going to try and go along with this. I'm going to look and see at the sample applications that Apple's given us because Apple's done so well for us over the years. I'm sure they'll give me a lot of great ideas about what I can do. So, you look at the calendar app. What am I supposed to do with this? It's like, okay. I have absolutely no idea how to process, how to deal with this. So I had this thing where I went from feeling like I could do absolutely anything that I wanted to feeling like I was being put in this little tiny box. where like there was just almost nothing that I could do because everything had to look a certain way, and it was incredibly frustrating and intimidating to me. And I kind of got away from all of the the liberal arts part of the technology and liberal arts intersection because it was something that I couldn't quite process. I felt like I couldn't be creative and do all of the things that I loved and I thought were interesting. And so like it's been 2 years since this happened. And I figured in those 2 years that we would have a pioneer, we would have somebody that would come out and show us the way of being able to embrace this design aesthetic and how to be able to give it personality and make it ours, but I feel like that really hasn't happened yet. And I feel kind of like we're all frozen and we don't really know what we're supposed to do. And I also kind of think like that good design, it's a little bit like unit testing and refactoring. It's one of those things that we know that we're supposed to do, that we're supposed to have in order to have really awesome, great applications, but I feel like a lot of us don't really do that because, when you spend 3 months developing an application, you get it to the point where it works, you kind of don't want to have to spend another 3 months going back and refactoring it, writing unit tests, doing the other stuff when you could put it out on the store and get enough money to go to Taco Bell and get, the fourth meal thing at 2 o'clock in the morning. So again, like over the last year or so, I've really been looking at this aesthetic because it's really been bothering me that nobody's figured out how to deal with it yet. And I feel like we've kind of misjudged it a little bit. I feel like it's a very subtle way of designing applications, and I feel like we're not really giving it its full due, that we haven't really thought through what Apple was telling us when they presented this design 2 years ago. So purpose of this talk was kind of to talk to everybody. Like, I mean, I came from a graphic design background, and I find all of this stuff to be incredibly intimidating, and so I can't even imagine what it's like for people who haven't had graphic design stuff. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my own struggles with trying to come to grips with the iOS design aesthetic and ways that I was able to kind of deal with it, and hopefully that will help you out in your quest to be the great indie developer. Oh, that's right, I have a So when I originally pitched this talk, I had this idea that I was going to write my first application. I was going to apply all of these awesome ideas to this application. I was going to tell you about how I implemented them. That hasn't quite worked out, and I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about why I don't have an application to show you right now. But my first application that I wanted to write, I wanted to do something that was fairly simple. I wanted to write a heart rate application. I was planning to do this when the Apple Watch came out because it had the sensor to go and check the heart rate. HealthKit was still a relatively new thing, so I thought I'd write this a quick and easy app in like 2 or 3 weeks right before WWDC because I figured nobody was going to write an app right before WWDC, and then I'd corner the market on the heart rate apps for the Apple Watch while everybody was waiting to see what iOS 9 had in store for us. So I wanted something that worked with the Apple Watch. I wanted to just display live heart rate data and show other stuff from HealthKit. So this is the original design aesthetic that I had set up for the app. And this was what I was planning to put out in like 2 or 3 weeks. And I kept looking at this, and it just kept bothering me more and more and more to look at this because it was just so boring. It was horrible. It's these table views, which they're great for displaying information, and they're easy to use because you don't have to deal with auto layout. You don't have to deal with all this other stuff. But I just looked at this and like, this has absolutely no personality whatsoever. It looks like I put it together over a weekend, and like we found out this morning, you can't put an app together over the weekend, put it out on the store, and expect it to make any kind of impact whatsoever. And I just looked at this, and I'm like, I can't put this out on the store and put my name on this and tell people, this represents me because I hate this. This is horrible. I am not going to put. I'm not doing this. This is bad. So then I was going and I was trying to figure out how to make it different, like how to not use table views, how to do this other stuff. And I just kept looking at Interface Builder and looking at the design, and I felt like this. It's like, I feel like I'm going to break this damn thing. I feel like there's nothing I can do here because I don't know how to go forward and actually make something that is different and unique from what comes built in with Interface Builder. So one of the big things that I want to emphasize in here during this talk is this. Design frameworks are hard. I don't think we really give enough credit to the fact that design frameworks are hard. I know when I was looking for a job last year, I would talk to people and I would say, I know OpenGL and I know all this graphic design stuff and I know all of these other things that make up the bulk of what we do with our applications. And like every single person I would interview with would go, yeah, that's really great that you know all of this design stuff, but do you know core data? Do you know something useful? And I feel like we don't really give enough credit to people who have gone in and actually like mastered any of these frameworks, and because I think we as a community have kind of decided that design is a non-technical thing, that people who do it aren't smart enough to be programmers, and that I don't feel like we've really given enough credit to people who really have gone and embraced design, because we're used to thinking of it as being an easy thing, but it's not an easy thing, especially not in iOS. So we have all of these various frameworks. All of these frameworks are incredibly powerful. The one thing that I learned when I was going and learning Photoshop and Logic and Reason and all of these other programs for my audio and video stuff is that the more powerful a tool is, the harder it is to learn and the more complex it is. And the harder it is to actually go and master any of these things. So even though all of these frameworks are powerful and they will allow you to do really complicated and interesting things, they're incredibly difficult to master. And I know if you're on a deadline and you really want to try to get something out in a week or two, you don't want to spend 2 or 3 months going and learning one of these frameworks to make something really interesting where you can just drop in a table view from UIKit. And we don't really have a lot of resources out there either about what to do with any of these things. So I found this book. This is the only book that I've been able to find on Quartz, also known as Core Graphics. I have the second edition of this book, now updated for Panther. The last time this book was updated was before iOS had been released. And there's been like nothing else out there after that. We can find lots of books on core data, we can find lots of books on networking, we can find a lot of books on other things in iOS, but there are very few books and resources out there on how to do really intricate, custom user interface and user experience stuff in iOS, which I think is a real shame because we have all of these awesome tools and toys that Apple's given us, but we don't really talk about them or do the work necessary in order to master them. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about specifically with this design aesthetic was the 3D aspect of the user interface. It kind of really bothers me that everybody keeps talking about how the UI in iOS 7 and beyond is a flat user interface. If you think back to the calendar app, yeah, if you're just looking at that screenshot that I took, that's a flat user interface. It's got 3 colors in it, it doesn't do anything. But if you're actually working with the application, it utilizes animation, and it's almost like it's one giant view. So you can go back, you can start at your year, and then you can pick a month, and then it zooms into the month, it zooms into the week, and it zooms into the day. And it feels like this large, continuous, like interactive thing that you can go and work with. So I feel kind of like when we were looking at things like the calendar app, we were looking at the wrong thing. We were looking at this flat, colorless thing that, again, was pure white, and we weren't really thinking about the fact that the way that it was designed was to be interactive and to zoom in and to zoom out. So for me personally, one thing that has stymied me a lot when I'm going and trying to do design is working with things in interface builders. That I'm looking at a flat screen, and I'm looking at a flat view on a flat screen. And to me, it feels kind of like almost like a PDF or a Photoshop document. It's a printed page. It's something that doesn't have any dimension. It's just a flat surface that stuff happens on. And one thing I'm trying to do, and I hope that other people will try to do, is instead of thinking of it like this, where you have just this flat thing sitting here, you start thinking of it like this. Like instead of it being like a screen, it's a window into a 3-dimensional environment where things exist in different planes, and that they can move around, and they can interact, and they can be in front of each other, and they can zoom in, and they can zoom out, and that you're dealing with a large 3D space rather than just a flat surface. So this movie came out 10 years ago, Minority Report. I know a lot of people, including me, were looking at this going, holy crap, this is so cool. It would be great if you could just go up and like touch things and move them around. We can do this now. We have the technology to put together interfaces like this. I mean, yeah, we don't have screens that are this large, but we do. My old teacher, Eric Knapp, would be very happy because he can use it for his sheet music, for his Chapman stick. But beyond that, we can do this right now. But the thing is, it's not an easy thing to do. It takes time and it's complicated. And as Larry Wall likes to say, easy things should be easy and complicated things should be possible. We are at a point now where complicated things are possible, but we haven't really thought about how to deal with it, and haven't been willing to go through and actually do the work necessary to create these complicated things. So I'm hoping that we'll be able, by the end of this talk, to at least conceptualize doing these complicated things and thinking about this a little bit differently. So I want to talk about setting up a design space. I don't know about anybody else, but I've spent a lot of time going and just designing directly in Interface Builder. I didn't go into anything else. I just was trying to do things on the computer, and that really didn't work for me very well. I also didn't spend a lot of time practicing my design because I didn't feel like it was an important thing to do. So one thing that you have to do if you want to be a good designer is that you have to actually practice designing. You can't learn how to swim if you're gonna go and like hang out in the kiddie pool and be like above like 2 inches of water. That's just not going to happen. And if you're just spending all of your time in interface builder trying to do design, you're not going to be a very good designer. So you need to kind of go a little bit beyond that and do a couple of more complicated and interesting things. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I set up my design space. So this is part of my design space. I'll move things out of the way so we can actually sit and draw. But I'm going to go over all of these different tools and what I do with them. So one indispensable thing that I have that I bought like by the thousands is 8x10 note cards. I find 8x10 note cards are really awesome because if you just have a plain 8x10 note card, it's about the same size and shape and dimension as an iPhone screen. And then another thing you can do with them is you can cut them up into smaller and smaller pieces, and you can have them be your views. So you can go and instead of writing everything on one screen, you can put all of your different components onto different views, and then you can move them around and touch them and manipulate them in different ways. I also have a lot of different markers, colored pencils, etc. I was that asshole kid in kindergarten who kept telling my mom that I had to have the 120 colors of crayons because I needed to make sure that I had 20 different shades of pink. Yes, I know the difference between fuchsia and magenta. So for me, it's really helpful to actually take colors and like draw them out and try to figure out what color design aesthetic I would like to be using for my applications and to figure out my color scheme. One thing I noticed that my mom is really interested in doing interior decorating and house painting stuff. So she has all of these books of all of these different color schemes that will have 5 or 6 different colors that where you have a main color and a point color and an accent color. And I think these are really awesome resources for getting ideas about color schemes that you can incorporate into your design. And I know when I was going through and trying to do design, I was trying to use nothing but color, and it got a little bit extreme. One thing that I noticed was a really good example of how to be able to incorporate strong colors into a design aesthetic is if you look at football uniforms. If you look at something like the Chicago Bears, you have this navy blue and this orange. When you look at the players' uniforms, you don't have just navy blue and orange. You have them wearing gray, you have them wearing white, and they use the other colors as an accent. So it's really important to find a neutral color that you can use for most of your application, and then have a primary color and a point color to make sure that you're not overwhelming the user and looking like you're creating a GeoCities site from 1996. I also use a lot of graph paper and engineering paper. So I have a friend, Emily Van Buren. She just recently moved out to Cupertino, and we sadly lost her to Apple, and I hope that one day we will get her back. But when I was starting to learn how to program, she told me to go out and buy a bunch of graph paper and pens and to just write out all of my ideas for not just design, but also for programming. I thought this was stupid because, oh, I can just program on my computer. Why would I want to draw things out? Drawing things out, it completely changes the way that you approach a problem. I was working on a topography map where I had to use a lot of trigonometry, and I had a matrix of different points in 3-dimensional space that I had in my program, and being able to actually write them out on paper and reference them and touch them and interact with them physically in the real world changed the way that I was able to approach all of the problems that I was doing in programming. So even if you're not going to go into design, I highly recommend at least getting graph paper and pens and being able to actually write things out on paper, because it really helps you process what you're trying to do. And I don't know about anybody else, but I love tools. Tools are a lot of fun. One of my favorite tools that I have is this thing. This is a lead holder. It's kind of like a mechanical pencil on steroids. You go out, and if you go into like Michael's craft store, you go to the drafting part of the store, the one aisle, you can get one of those for $6, and then you can buy a bunch of 2mm leads for $10, and you have pencil for the next 20 years, because you don't use them very much, and they never break. And they're a lot easier to use, and they're a lot of fun to go and use a Bowles special sharpener on. So these things are awesome. They're designed for engineers, draftspeople, architects. They're so much fun to use, and they're awesome. Along with that, if you're going to try to do design, buy a sketchbook. I have an interview with Vicki Wenderlich that I did for NS Brief that will be released at some point. I was talking to her about how she got into doing graphic design. She came from a mechanical engineering background, and then she became an artist and was doing design for all of his tutorials. And I asked her what she did, and she said that you start off by just sketching every single day. And I said, well, I don't know how to go about sketching every single day because I don't know what I'm supposed to sketch. She said, copy something. If you really like Sailor Moon, go and copy Sailor Moon. Take a picture of your pug and try to render your pug on there, because that's the way you start out. You start out copying something that somebody else did so that you can get an idea of how it got put together so that you can apply that into your own things. And I think that's something that we've kind of forgotten and lost as programmers, is that we don't remember how we learned to program. And the way we learn to program is the same way that you learn how to do anything. I learned how to program by going and doing a bunch of tutorials over and over and over again. I would do the same tutorial 5 times, and by the time I got to the 5th one, then I understood how it worked. It was like magic. And I know, like, I feel like I'm not a drawer. I was never an artist. This was not something that I did. I got into Photoshop and photography because I couldn't draw. But the thing is, you have to be able to go in and, like, do that in order to get better at it. And I think we feel kind of like if we're not immediately good at something, then we don't want to go and try it because it makes us feel bad. You know, my example is, you know, when you're a kid, you know, it's like, oh, here, you can draw a tiger. You draw these three circles, and all of a sudden you have this thing. And it's like, I think you're missing a couple of steps in here. I don't know how to get from there to here. And you don't have to get from there to there. You just, you know, take something that you think is interesting and go out and just try to copy it. Because that's how we started with programming. That's how you start with anything. And I think that that's a step that a lot of us kind of forget when we're going and we're trying to learn something new. Another part that I like about all of my note cards that I have for all of my design processes is that they're cheap and they're easy to deal with. So in this particular situation, I was thinking about how I was going to present all of my workout statistics. And I realized after I wrote this first one that I needed to have a label for the day, the time, and some other stuff. So I can just rip this up. I just do another one over here exactly like it. It takes 2 seconds. And I use like, you know, half a penny worth of paper, and I can go and, you know, just tear it up and throw it away. So this was kind of my idea about what all of my views were going to look like. And so I put all of my views on different note cards so that I can, like, pick them up, take them off, and kind of manipulate them and move them around. So they're not just like, you know, I don't have a separate screen for each one of my views. I have them on their own thing, and I'm able to manipulate them. I can think about how they interact in 3D space. I can think about ways that I can manipulate them and deal with them, because to me it's not just the flat screen, it's a 3-dimensional thing. I could even use them as a carousel if I wanted to, but I really don't recommend doing that because carousels are just horrible. But I could do that, and it's easier for me to conceptualize that these can move and interact in 3D space when I have them as separate things that I can pick up, manipulate, and touch, and move around and think about how I want them to be interacted with. Also, another thing that I can do on paper that I can't do in Interface Builder is I can make notes to myself. So in this particular one, I had this idea. So I mentioned app.net earlier today, which, like, nobody uses anymore, but but there was a developer, Bill Kuntz, who put together a application called Felix. And he had this really awesome navigation controller where it was a puck in the lower part of the screen, where when you touched it, all of your options would animate up, and then when you picked what you wanted, they would animate back down again. And I really wanted to emulate what he was doing, so what I did was I drew out, you know, I drew out the navigation controller, but I also drew my notes in here about how I wanted it to animate in different colors. So I can put my animation notes directly on my card, and that's something that you can't really do in Interface Builder, is to write notes to yourself. I think I need to file an enhanced report with Apple on that. So now that I've talked a little bit about my own personal design processes, I want to talk a little bit about the difference between good design and bad design. So there's more than one kind of bad design. I mean, we all kind of know, you know, I've already talked about the boring, you know, kind of the obfuscates information, it's not intuitive, it's ugly, noisy, you know, we all know stuff like this. Remember, you know, back in the day when we had these awesome, you know, like, websites with, you know, linking tags and all the other stuff. You know, we all know this is bad design, but there's more than one type of bad design. So I want to talk about another type of bad design. So let's see. Okay. Some of you are older than me, so you might actually remember this commercial. So this is a very funny, creative, interesting commercial. I think we can all agree on that, right? This is a very famous marketing failure. So that commercial was for Nissan. That commercial aired during the Super Bowl, and that commercial, this particular ad campaign, the Enjoy the Ride campaign, cost Nissan $200 million. The particular car that they had in that commercial was discontinued 2 months after they created the commercial and aired it during the Super Bowl. So this was a very famous ad campaign. It won a lot of awards, it was very memorable. People who were my age or older kind of remember this because it was on a lot. But the thing was, it didn't fulfill its purpose. It didn't get people to go to the Nissan dealership and buy Nissan cars. It nearly bankrupted the company. So just because you have a really cool, awesome, like, user interface that's got, like, you know, like sparkles and animations and 3D and all this other stuff, it doesn't fulfill its purpose of allowing the user to go in and do what they need to do, then it is a failure. So bear that in mind when you're trying to do creative user interfaces, is that it's not good to do something creative just to be creative. You need to make sure that your creativity is serving the purpose of helping the user accomplish what they want to do. So since most of us are developers and we don't want to become full-time designers, at some point in time you're going to have to hire a designer. So I'm going to tell you a little bit my story of going and hiring a designer. So back when I originally came out here last year, I was a poor college student and I wanted to have business cards that I wanted to hand out because I wanted somebody to hire me. But I didn't have enough drawing skills to draw my own logo, and so I went and I found one on the internet. And this was what I had on all of my business cards up until recently. So there are a couple of problems that I have with this particular piece of design. Well, first off, like I said, I found it on the internet. So I couldn't customize it at all. It took me forever to find any kind of, so my Twitter handle is Red Queen Coder, and it's from Alice Through the Looking Glass, from the Red Queen character who was trying to run as fast as she could just to stay in one place. Anytime I look up Red Queen from the Alice series, I always wind up with the Queen of Hearts or the horrible amalgam of the Red Queen from the horrible Tim Burton movie that is a travesty that I don't want to talk about any longer. So this was the only thing that I could find that actually had a chess theme to it. I don't own this. So I've been like kind of hoping for like years that whoever does own this does not find out that I've been putting it on my stuff and using it to brand myself, because I don't want them coming after me. Well, I mean, I would like to kind of pay them now that I'm able to do so, but I don't own this, and I've been kind of living on a prayer that nothing bad is going to happen. Like I said, I can't customize this. It's something I found on the internet. There's still like a heart theme in here, and it's not really clear about what's going on here. And like this is nice, but it doesn't scream me. It's not really my thing. It's just it's a nice thing, but it's not mine. So when I decided that I wanted to have my own logo, I was trying to think about what I could do that really represented me. And I noticed that there were two things that people keep tweeting me on Twitter about over the last couple of years that I seem to be known for. One of them is that I love pugs. I get so many pug pictures from people that it's like not even funny. So everybody knows that I love pugs. And the other thing that people know that I love is wine. Since one of those is not really something that I want to let people who are going to pay me money to do stuff for them know, the wine thing was kind of out. So that left pugs. So I decided that I wanted a logo that had a pug. I specifically wanted it to be based on images of my pug, Delia Derbyshire. I wanted to make sure that it had a red crown that looked like the queen chess piece. And I wanted to make sure that it was a design that I could print on stickers and have as a logo. So I kind of looked around and I asked people for recommendations, and I was made aware of the designer Mary Cagle. Her Twitter handle is Cube Watermelon. She lives in Japan and she is a webcomic artist, which means that she's doing this as a hobby and does not necessarily get paid for her work. She does commissions, which was really awesome. So I reached out to her and told her that I wanted a logo. I told her what I wanted. I sent her pictures of my dog, and I made it very clear to her that I wanted to pay her to do this. So she came back to me a couple of days later, and she sent me these adorable little sketches. And I loved them both so much, and I asked her if she would do both of them. And so she went and she fully rendered these, and it took about a week, and I was able to pay her, and I got something that I absolutely love. And if anybody's interested, I have that one on a sticker, and I brought a bunch of them with me, and I'm handing them out to people. So my tips from my perspective of working with this designer is, just have a good idea about what you want. Don't just go and say, I want you to do something cool. The more specific that you are about what exactly it is that you want, the better result that you're going to get. Find somebody who has an art style that you like. Like I said, with my original logos, this kind of Victorian pen ink style thing that really wasn't me. And I knew that Mary did like an anime type style that was very cute and adorable, and that was more along the lines of what I wanted. And try not to waste their time. Don't send them a commission and then keep changing it all the time arbitrarily. And email them an hour after they accept and say, where is it? Where is it? I need to know where this is. Come on. And if there's some aspect of the work that you don't like, send it back. People want you to be happy. Their livelihood depends on having people like me who will come to conferences and tell people that they should hire them because they really did good work. You don't want people to kind of go, oh, okay, thanks, and then go around, God, this person was horrible to work with. If you didn't have something that you liked, send it back. Last one, pay your designer, please. Pay your designers. There are a couple of reasons you want to pay your designers. First one is it clears up any issues of ownership and legality. I know that I can do anything that I want to with my pug sticker because I paid for it, I own it, it's mine, and I don't have to worry about anybody coming after me because it is something that I own. Makes the designer more likely to get your project done. If you're talking to your high school niece who is studying for finals and you want her to create your logo, that's probably not high on her list of things to do when she's trying to get into college. This allows you to get exactly what you want. And yeah, you can go on like Shutterstock or Google or whatever and try to find something that sort of fits what you're looking for, but it doesn't really give you a chance to customize stuff. So this gives you a chance to really focus on what it is that you want from your design. Also, you want people to pay you for your work, so why would you want people to do things for experience or whatever? I mean, I feel like it's a professional thing, where if you want people to pay you for work that you do, that you should be willing to pay people for work that they do that you can't do yourself. And like, seriously, this is 2015, this should not be a question of the fact that you pay people who are doing work for you. All right, so I'm going to be telling you a nice story. I was told when I practiced this for a different group that I needed to preface this by making sure that everybody knows that everything I'm about to say in the story has a point, and I'm not just up here complaining about something that I feel was unfair. So I want to talk a little bit about my first programming job. I got my first programming job for a startup in Madison back at the end of 2013. I was there in January of 2014, and I had my other iOS developer come up to me and ask me, "Do you still have a copy of Xcode 4? "No, I don't have a copy of Xcode 4 because we've been on Xcode 5 since October. Why are you asking me this?" He's like, "Oh, no, it's cool. Don't worry about it. I still have my copy of Xcode 4. "Okay, I'm repeating the question. Why do we need a copy of Xcode 4? "Oh, yeah, we try to build the app in Xcode 5 and, it breaks." "Okay, this is January, and we have a deadline of February 1st where everything has to build in Xcode 5 or else we can't update the app on the store." "Oh, yeah, we've been real worried about that for like months. We don't know what we're going to do." I'm like, "I've been here for a month. Why haven't I been told this? This is something that needs to be fixed now." "Well, the app, it breaks. We haven't had time to fix it. What are you going to do?" So I've been here for a month, and I feel like I really need to, make a stand and make a splash and make sure that I show that I can, really go out and do an awesome job. So I go up to the CEO and the CTO, and I'm like, "This is an unacceptable situation. I want to take personal responsibility for updating the app to iOS 7, making sure it builds on Xcode 5. I'm going to do this awesome job, and it's going to be great." And but I told them, I specifically told them, I do not want to have responsibility for the design. You are the product owners. You decide what the design is. If you don't like something that I am doing, you ask me to fix it, and I will fix it. I do not want to make any design editorial decisions whatsoever. And they were like, "Okay, cool, that sounds fine." So I open up the app, and I start trying to update it for iOS 7. I go into the storyboards. I realize that every single element in the storyboards has a backing image. So every single button has a backing image instead of a background color. And they all had different backing images, even if they were the same size and the same shape and the same color. So we had a dozen different red rectangles for a background image for a button that was exactly the same on a lot of different views. And there were hundreds of these in the entire application. So I went up to him and I'm like, "Dude, why do we have backing images for the buttons?" He's like, "Oh, you don't know what it was like. We were in such a hurry. It was just easier to go and create all of these backing images than it was to set the background color." Okay, all right, okay. So I went and I got rid of all the backing images that I could. I tried to set all the background colors. I went through all the craft. I went through all of the views. I got everything in the storyboard, and I got it to a point where it looked nice. So it's like, all right, awesome. Ran the app. Only half of my changes took. Thing looked like a patchwork quilt where the background was one color and all of the text labels and everything were a different color. So I'm like, okay, this is very weird. I don't know what's going on. So I went back to the guy. I'm like, "Hey, how come half of my changes took and the other half didn't?" He's like, "Oh yeah, like some of them, we overrode them in the view controller." "Why?" "Oh, you don't know this? Okay, okay, I know what it was like. All right, okay." Went through all the view controllers, and I deleted all of the code associated with things that were overriding things in the storyboard because I thought it was best for everything to be in the storyboard because it's nice and visual and you can see what it's supposed to look like. Awesome, cool, it's great. Ran it. Still about 20% of things did not take. So I went back through the view controllers, couldn't figure out what was going on. So I went back to him and I'm like, "I don't know if I want the answer to this question, but why won't my changes take now?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, those changes. I put them in the application delegate." So I felt this horrible sense of ominous dread when I went back to my code and I opened up the application delegate, which I hadn't done quite yet since I had come to work at this company. I looked at the app delegate, and there were 2,000 lines of code. the app delegate. So after I got done being in the fetal position on the floor, I got back up and I dealt with the stuff in the application delegate, and I finally got it to a point where everything was consistent. All of the colors were the same, it was consistent, everything was great, and it was completely editable, it could be fixed. Like I could change anything I wanted to in it. This was great. So I went home for the weekend, and at 7:30 on Saturday night, I got a call from the CTO. He said, I don't know how to tell you this, so I'm just going to say it bluntly. The work that you've done is terrible. When I looked at the work that you did, I feel like you went up to me, grabbed me by the hair, and punched me in the balls. And I don't want you working on this app anymore. Okay, so I'm being fired now, aren't I? No, we want you to work on something else. We just don't want you to work on this app anymore. I'm like, this is the only app that we have in our company, so what am I supposed to work on? We don't care what you work on as long as it's not this, but you're not fired. Just keep going to work and keep working. Look, of course I was going to be fired, but they needed to talk to a lawyer first to make sure I couldn't sue them in order to do that. So let's look at this from the perspective of the people that I was working for, like the CEO and the CTO. So this was the decision cost for them associated with hiring and firing me. So they paid me for a month of working on the app and the design that they were then eventually going to throw out because they didn't like what I had done. They had to pay me for the week that I was on the payroll while they were consulting the lawyer to see if I could sue them. They had to deal with the associated legal fees of talking to the lawyer and having to draw up paperwork, and then they additionally had to pay me the 2-week severance to avoid being sued in order to convince me to go and sign the paper that the lawyer had given them. So this is quite a bit of money associated from their viewpoint of deciding to fire me because they didn't like the work that I did. So the day before I got fired, I finally got to see what the actual application looked like, the way that they wanted it after they gave it back to the other guy, and I got to see what changes they decided to make that made it okay where mine was completely objectionable. They changed the color. Do you know how long it would have taken me to go in and change the color? 20 minutes. So the biggest thing that bothers me about this particular situation is, you remember I was talking about my whole long ordeal of going through and actually trying to fix the application? I don't know what they saw. They refused to tell me why they didn't like what work I did on the application. So I don't know if they saw my final version of the app, the one where everything was consistent, or they saw the first version of it where half was one color and half was one color that looked atrocious. Because I know if I'd seen that, when I was working on that the first time and I saw how horrible this looked, I was embarrassed. It bothered me tremendously. I worked my ass off trying to get this thing fixed because it bothered me so badly that it looked like this. And I don't know what they saw because they refused to tell me. It's entirely possible that what they saw was the original first draft of the application where only half of the changes took. So now I'm kind of going through my career knowing that there are people out there who think that I'm incompetent and think that I am a bad developer, and I don't know why. I don't know if it was a mistake. I don't know if they saw the wrong thing, and I don't know if they actually saw the last piece of work that I did, and that really kind of hurts me a little bit. So my takeaways in here for this particular story is, talk to the designer. It's entirely possible if you get something that you don't like, that it wasn't what they meant to send you. I sent my slides to Saul to have him look at my slides. I sent him an old version of my slides where I only had like 8 slides that weren't this whole fleshed out thing, and he was kind of like, okay, looks like you got a little bit of work left to do on these slides. And I'm like, no, I don't. I've got like 60 of them. And he's, no, there's only like 8 in here. I mean, it was a mistake. People make mistakes. It's possible that if you got something that's horrible, the person didn't really need to send that to you. So, be clear about what you didn't like. Tell someone, I don't like this because this thing is bad. And generally people go like, cool, I can go in and I can fix it. And again, just give people a chance to fix things because, nobody wants to. We do these things because we enjoy doing them. We don't do them because we want people to feel like they got punched in the balls. We want people to be happy and enjoy the work that we do because we work really hard on it, and we want people to enjoy the work that we do. And we don't want people going around saying that we're bad designers or developers or incompetent when it's something we could easily fix in 20 minutes. So, I want to do a call to action. I'm giving everybody homework. I want everybody to go home, and I want everybody to buy a bunch of crayons and colored pencils and note cards. This is like school supply season. They're like all over the place. Target's lousy with these things. Go out and buy all of this stuff. Set up a little dedicated area for your stuff. When your kids are doing your homework, you sit up next to them and you get out your crayons and you do all of your design stuff along with them while they're asking you questions. like, embrace crappy design. Know that when you start off, your design is going to suck. But if you understand that it sucks, and you can feel like it sucks within your soul, then you know that you can at least make it better. You can at least look at it and go, I know I don't like this, but I know I can do better. It'll push you to, it'll make you a better person. It'll build character. Get away from the computer. You can't do good design on a computer because you can't think of it that way while you're in front of the computer. You have a certain context that you have when you're sitting in front of your computer that you don't have when you're working with pens and paper and crayons and scissors and other things where you can actually touch and manipulate stuff. So get away from your computer, sit down, actually do things in the physical world and touch things. And again, try to make a design without a table, a collection, or a stack. Try to do something that is, doesn't use built-in like UI kit elements. I know it's really hard. The closest I ever came to throwing my computer out the window was working with auto layout, which I still have not mastered, but it bothers me. I would like to master auto layout and make it my bitch because it bothers me that I don't know how to do it. So take something that you don't know how to do and master it because it will make you feel so much better. So again, just to reiterate, how to get started. Find something that you want to try and copy it. Know that it's not going to be very good right away. Try to draw a little bit every day, and know that you're going to suck, but just kind of embrace the suckiness and be okay with it because know that you're going to get better. So I was talking about there were kind of a limited number of resources out there, so here are some of the ones that I recommend if you're interested in trying to get better with like user interface design. iOS Animations by Tutorial by Marin, who was doing a workshop on it yesterday. Learning Scene Kit by David Ronquist. There's a book called 3D User Interfaces Theory and Practice. I got it off of Amazon on the Kindle for I think like 15 bucks. There are a lot of tutorials on raywenderlich.com. I'm not just pitching it because I work for them now. But like they'll go through, there's a lot of like Scene Kit, animation. There's a lot of really awesome UI tutorials on there that can really help you get up and running with all of the different frameworks that we've got. And then also Learning Core Animation by Nick Lockwood. So that's most of what I've got. So go forth and make awesome shit. Thank you.